The McConnell Foundation's Recode project is an initiative to support a culture and a practice of social innovation and social entrepreneurship in post-secondary in Canada. So post-secondary meaning colleges and universities. And essentially the work that we're trying to do is happening on two levels. So in one level, we're a granting program. So we're supporting right now 26 different institutions in Canada, across the country, quite literally, from Vancouver Island to 7,000 kilometers or so away in Newfoundland, to do different activities related to social innovation and social entrepreneurship. So building incubator spaces and seed funding and developing curriculum, things of that nature. And then at the same time, we're also trying to build a national platform, to build a movement around social entrepreneurship and social innovation in post-secondary Canada. And that work is much more difficult to do. Canada is a country where our geography can be prohibitive. It's difficult to work on a national basis because of our geography, different cultures, all sorts of things. And at the same time, the post-secondary environment is one that is maybe a bit more used to competing than collaborating. But we're trying to see what is it that we can do together that we can't do alone to really change the student experience in Canada and ultimately to help us better meet our social, environmental, and economic challenges.
Right, so the question was about recommendations to universities on what they should do.
Yes. So my recommendations for universities and colleges around how to infuse a culture of social innovation and social entrepreneurship would be, firstly, to have a serious introspection and reflection and discussion about whether or not this kind of work is actually appropriate for you. I don't think it's something that all institutions need to be doing, and there is some danger that because social innovation is a bit of a buzzword now, and there's maybe some external or even internal pressure to do it, that you might feel like you should be doing it, but you don't see it as part of your core work. So the way, I think, to start to see if it's something you should be doing is if you're seeing it as integral to your work. So it's not an add-on to something apart or separate that you're going to now do, but really it becomes a horizontal, right? So it's a cross-cutting piece of work that you're saying social innovation will be part of all aspects of what our institution is delivering. And once you're able to answer that question, then I would start to look at, okay, what is the low-hanging fruit? Right? What are the easiest things that we can do? And I think that is very institution specific, but I think it is much easier to fan flames than to start something completely new. See what's already happening, try and fan those flames. And then the third thing would be to understand who are your champions, right? And I think it's very useful to have champions in all part of the system that you're trying to affect. So yes, you do definitely need the senior leaders, but ultimately this work will probably and hopefully will be about students. So who are your student champions, who are the student leaders you can have, and also sort of that messy middle. And from there, what you want to do is you want to build a network of allies and then identify, I think, what is your North Star? So what is the direction that you're trying to get toward? And then what is the first step that you need to take to get there? And finally, I would say, you need to be very attentive, especially when working in social innovation, which is quite complex, to not let perfect be the enemy of good. Can you do things that are good enough to just move forward and keep the ball going and learn and iterate as you're working?
All right, thank you. Just move on to the next question. What kind of public policies do you see essential to be in place to do the work that you're doing?
So the public policies, I'm not a policy expert, but the public policies that I think would be helpful, and bearing in mind Canada is the only OECD country that doesn't actually have a federal education policy. We're a very defederalized federation, so I don't know how helpful my thoughts on policy are, just to be very frank. But what I hear from my colleagues is that a big barrier to this type of work is how the post-secondary system recognizes and rewards accomplishment. So the tenure, the research, the publisher Paris, all of those things, it forces professors to pay less attention to students and to practical action and more attention to research. and other pressures. So I think any policy that enables and incentivizes the types of activities that we've been talking about at this conference, so experiential learning, opportunities to start things of that nature, that incentivizes individuals to get involved in those projects would be good public policy. And I think those policies will differ depending on the legislative framework in which your institution operates in.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good. Great. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. Just some more questions. If you think about your RECODE project in Canada, could you also imagine that to work in Europe? And if yes, maybe to elaborate a bit on differences that you see in Canada and Europe, or what you maybe different?
Sure. So thinking about if RECODE could work in Europe, I should say that sort of comes with an assumption that it's working in Canada, and I don't think we know that yet. We have hopes and we have aspirations that it'll work in Canada, but we have to see. I think that there are probably elements of the work that we are doing in RECODE that would work in other environments, be they European or otherwise. And one of the things that I would think that would work in Europe is, we grant, right? And institutions are always looking for external funds, and we also connect. And so there's a question of, I don't know what is most helpful for European individuals and institutions that are working in this field, for what it is for them to connect on and to convene. But I think that there are probably some of the connective tissue pieces of RECODE and the broad and high-level goals. So the movement building work, which I imagine would work in the European environment, especially things like sharing of tools and all of that kind of work that we're trying to do. Okay. Maybe. We can cut that out. Yeah.
Last question is about your future plans and the future plans in the project.
My personal future plans?
But the future I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So future plans, particularly with the RECODE project.
So, in thinking about where RECODE is going, it is we are working in a dynamic, a complex environment, and are only now starting to know what we don't know. So to really properly think about that, I have to go back a year. So a year ago, I started in this job, and our first week, actually, we had a retreat, and we brought in 20 or 30 people, and we came up with all these action plans and working groups, and everybody's going to do X, Y, and Z, and essentially none of it worked. So what I take from that experience is strategy is great, and you do need a strategy, but your plans need to be grounded in a reality. And what is next for RECODE? We do know broad strokes of what we will do. We will have more funding. Right now our strategy is what we sometimes call let 1,000 flowers bloom. Right? So we're doing small projects, small local projects, which we think will have national application. Before, we wanted to do big national projects, and what we realized that actually wasn't the place to start. The place to start was smaller local, see what bubbles up nationally, and ideally what we want to be doing is taking some of those small flowers that we're letting bloom, and one of the students said, we need to be building some bouquets. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of putting the work that we want to do. So the future of RECODE, I think, is there will be more funding, we will be building bouquets, and I think if I had to bet at this stage, one thing I would bet on is that part of what I'm saying we won't do and will be wrong. And then the other thing that I would bet on is that I think we will probably look to invest quite deeply in a few places. In the sense that if it's useful to have stories. Stories help us identify the work that we're trying to do and where we want to go. And right now, when we talk about social innovation and social entrepreneurship, especially in a post-secondary setting, it can be very abstract. So what we really want to do is be able to say, that's what we want. This thing that's happening over here, and everybody immediately understands it. So that's what we're looking to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
You've been here for a day. Is there anything that you would want to say on tape about your social economy conference that you've seen on the first day? Any impressions, anything that sticked out that you just want to maybe share with those who will see the video?
Sure. My experience of the conference is, it is always very inspiring to see the dedication and the passion of individuals who work so deeply and so intensely and so lovingly on a project in difficult circumstances. And I don't necessarily mean difficult as a negative thing, but difficult in terms of many cultures, many languages, I'm sure many opinions. But to see it through, and to see it through with such care and intention, for me, the impression that I leave with is one of respect and admiration, because it's difficult work, and to do it, we need people who are committed not just to the project, but also to each other. And I see that all around me, and it's very humbling to be part of.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much.